Good morning. I'd like to introduce Jeff Buchanan. Jeff Buchanan is a recently retired lieutenant general, served as the commander of the United States Army North, and also as a senior commander of Fort Sam Houston and Camp Bullis. He served 4 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. In 2017, he was dispatched to Puerto Rico after the island was devastated by Hurricane Maria to lead all military hurricane relief efforts and to see how the military could be more effective in the recovery effort. Please welcome Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan.
Thanks, Simon. Hey, good morning. It's mic'd up, so I'll stay away from that microphone if I can help myself today. It's my great honor to join you today. And I'm mindful of the fact that today is the 3rd of October. Does anybody know what happened in our history on the 3rd of October? Kirk, I know you do. So 3 October 1993, if I'm not mistaken, we lost 18 great Americans as part of Task Force Ranger in Mogadishu, Somalia. And I think it's today, 3rd Ranger Battalion is running what they call a Mogadishu Mile. They do it every single year to remember those great troops, but just as importantly, to support their families who continue to deal with the issues from that incident that happened 26 years ago. It's hard for me to believe it's been that long. But it's something that we do. And today, we'll talk about resilience. You're going to hear from a number of great guest speakers today. And I'm going to make some comments, but I thought before I started, I'd just explore a little bit and help you understand at least how I look at resilience. Because to me, resilience is not about avoiding adversity. It's accepting the fact that every one of us is going to face adversity. We're all going to have tough situations in our life. And, it might be that brother who leaves his family. It could be you lose your best friend in a car accident. You're fired, you're divorced. Well, we're going to hear from a very courageous person today who lost her son. I mean, these are really tough situations. But I believe we're all going to face them. And so this isn't about avoiding those things, but it's about how do you build up yourself to help yourself use these sometimes tragic situations as an opportunity for growth. How can we grow from this? And just as importantly, how can we help each other? That's really the helping each other part is the focus of my comments today. Because I want to talk about heroes. Now, if you ask your typical American or Canadian, Brit, Australian, Israeli, whomever, we've got a great panel here today, but if you ask your typical American who their heroes are, they're going to give you names like Tom Brady, LeBron James, Megan Rapinoe, Beyonce, even Miley Cyrus. And so the problem, though, is that we've confused being famous or having celebrity status with being heroic. Because if you look the word hero up in the dictionary, you'll find that it comes from the ancient Greeks. And really, there's only 2 requirements to be a hero: courageous acts and a noble purpose. 2 things: courageous acts and a noble purpose. Now, if you think back on those examples, athletes, musicians, etc., that I listed, even though some of them give some portion of their untold millions of dollars to charities, that doesn't necessarily make them heroes, because their acts are not always courageous, their purpose is not always noble. And the greatest difference that I can think of between celebrity status or being famous and true heroism happened on the 26th of February of 2007. So on that particular day, it was the morning after our Academy Award ceremony. Of course, there's this big celebration, and the press, paparazzi, whatever you want to call them, from all across the United States is focused in on the ceremony and the 2 big winners of the night. Now, I know that's a long time ago now, 12 years ago, but the two big movies that won were Little Miss Sunshine and The Departed. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen these movies. They're both great movies. Very different from each other, but they're really good movies, high quality. So all the press of the United States is focused on this. The rich, the beautiful, the famous. But there was another ceremony that day that happened at Fort Wainwright, Alaska, where a young man received a Distinguished Service Cross, our nation's second highest military award for valor. And none of the press paid any attention to that. And so his name was Stephen Sanford. And I'm guessing most of you have never heard of Stephen Sanford. So it's my great honor to share a little bit of Stephen Sanford's story with you today. And again, remember what I talked about: heroism, courageous acts, and a noble purpose. So a little bit more than a year prior to February of 2007, on the 19th of November 2005, Private First Class Stephen Sanford was with his platoon in a Stryker unit. Now, for those of you who don't know, a Stryker is a kind of a large mobile infantry carrier with 8 wheels. This particular unit was Charlie Company, 2nd of the 1st Infantry, out of the 172nd Brigade, Fort Wainwright, Alaska. And they were deployed to northern Iraq, in particular in Mosul. And this particular night, on the 19th of November, they were patrolling in the Al-Saqqara neighborhood of Mosul. Their platoon, 4 Stryker vehicles and about 40 troops. And they got this emergency call, and they realized that there was an Iraqi police station that was under attack, or kind of run into what turned out to be an Al-Qaeda safe house. So this platoon, these 4 Stryker vehicles, pull up across the street from this house, and all hell breaks loose in terms of fire coming from this house. So the first 3 squads assault across the road to go clear this house of these enemy forces. And Private Sanford's squad stayed in reserve at the Stryker vehicles. Now, as these guys go across the road, many of them were shot. They made their way to the edge of the building, and Sanford's squad is now called across the road to start evacuating casualties. And there's still bad guys in the building. And as he and his team leader are running across the road, Sanford is shot in the thigh and falls down, jumps back up, and makes his way across the street. And he and his team leader are standing next to the edge of this building where there's a small wall, and a rocket-propelled grenade lands at their feet, blows up, and sprays both of them with shrapnel. So at this point in time, he's been shot in the leg, he's hit with shrapnel. His team leader is knocked unconscious. Sanford grabs his team leader and drags him back across the road to where the vehicles are so that they can provide first aid. He then goes back across the road by himself to pull 2 more casualties out. And as he makes it back to where the Strykers are, he notices there's a non-commissioned officer in the doorway of this building who was shot in the neck. So Sanford goes running back across the road, is shot in the other leg, makes it to him, and as he gets to him and starts doing CPR, 2 Al-Qaeda guys come around the corner, shoot him twice in the back and once in the legs. So now he's been shot 3 times in the legs, twice in the back, sprayed with shrapnel. He turns around, kills both of them, and continues CPR until he passed out from loss of his own blood. And that night he was evacuated to a place at the time we called FOB Diamondback. It's basically the Mosul airfield. And he went into emergency surgery. We have incredible trauma surgeons. Sanford died twice in surgery that night. But he was, legally died, but he was revived both times. And here, a year and a half later, the 26th of February, 2007, he's being pinned the Distinguished Service Cross at Fort Wainwright, Alaska. Now, by this time, he's medically retired because, he's incapable of really performing what we needed him to do as a soldier. So he's wearing civilian clothes. So I hate to say it, and it might sound kind of bad. He's kind of a goofy kid. He's not the guy that you would, he wasn't the captain of the football team or anything. But he's standing there kind of tall and Ichabod Crane-like. And And General Pete Pace, who's our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, is pinning the Distinguished Service Cross on Private First Class Sanford. And as he's doing so, Sanford looks down. He's a really tall guy, right? He looks down and he notices General Pace's hands are shaking. He says, "Sir, what's going on?" He said, "Well, this is the first time I've ever given anybody a Distinguished Service Cross." And Sanford says, "Don't worry, sir, it's the first time I ever got one." You got to love guys like Private First Class Sanford. There's a hero for you. Courageous acts and a noble purpose. Now, if you look at the word courage, I mean, we have all, I could go around the room and ask you, what does courage mean? What is a courageous act? We'll probably get all different kinds of answers. But if you look at the word courage, it comes from the French. The heart of courage is coeur, which means heart in French. And so when you encourage somebody, you give them heart. When you discourage them, you take away their heart. And so to me, courageous acts is all about performing with heart. And a noble purpose, again, to me, no purpose is more noble than serving others. And that to me is at the heart of heroism. I think we have time, right, Barb? I'm going to tell another story real quick. So last week, I was speaking at an event at Fort Bliss, Texas. And I was telling this story last night, which I thought was kind of amusing. I was wearing my civilian tuxedo for the first time ever. And it was a military police ball. Last week was the 78th birthday of the Army's military police corps, and this particular battalion had asked me to come and be the guest speaker at their ball. And it was my first opportunity to wear a civilian tux. I retired officially on 1 September 2019, so a little bit more than a month ago. And I was in the receiving line in my civilian tux, and I knew that I had arrived when a brand new second lieutenant came up to me and said, "Yo, dude, what's up?" And I said, "Okay, I'm fully retired now." But I told a story in this ball about one of their own. And it would amaze me that a number of these military police troops had never heard of Leanne Hester. So let me tell you about Leanne. Leanne was born in January 1982, and this story takes place on the 20th of March of 2005, also in Iraq, but in southern Iraq in this case. So she was 23 years old when this happened. She had enlisted as a military police troop in the Kentucky Army National Guard. And her company was mobilized, and it was part, I think it was the 167th Police Company and Military Police Company, and it was part of the 503rd Military Police Battalion. And they were based in Iraq. Now, for those of you who have been in Iraq, I know we have a number of folks here who have, they were based out of Camp Victory, but their area of operations was south of there, south of the Baghdad area. And this particular squad of military police, 10 troops, call sign Raven 42, not like the Air Force Ravens, a little different. Like I said, military police, but their call sign was Raven 42. Leanne Hester was 42 Bravo, because she was the team leader for this squad of MPs. Now, their job was to search for IEDs and provide convoy escorts for convoys that were going through the area. And they didn't necessarily stay with the same convoy during its whole route, but when it was in this particular area, they provided security. And on this day, the 20th of March of 2005, they were escorting a group of about 30 vehicles, driven by, at the time, what we called TCNs, third country nationals, probably mostly Pakistani contractors who were driving these big convoys up from Kuwait into Iraq. And this squad of MPs, about 3 vehicles, is providing Humvees, is providing security for this convoy when they got ambushed. Now, the ambushers at this point, again, Al-Qaeda troops, at the time we called them AIF, anti-Iraqi forces, but they were Al-Qaeda. There's about 50 of them, and they were laying in an ambush site in an orchard. Now, this orchard had a bunch of irrigation ditches in it, that were essentially parallel with the road where this convoy had been on, and these guys reinforced these ditches and dug them out. So they had a complex ambush, and they were using these irrigation ditches as cover. They shot RPK machine guns, AK-47s, and RPG-7s at this convoy. And in doing so, they disabled the first truck, and they stopped the truck, so they stopped the convoy in the kill zone, which is what they wanted. And they started shooting at these vehicles. The squad leader, Raven 42, directed Sergeant Hester, Leanne Hester, let's get our vehicles over here, put them between these trucks and the ambush, and establish a base of fire. And they did so. They pulled up. They laid down a base of fire, and Sergeant Hester directed her Mark 19. For those of you who don't know, it's a automatic 40-millimeter grenade launcher and her 240 Bravo 7.62 machine gun to actually shoot at these Al-Qaeda troops and keep their head down. She and Sergeant 9 both dismounted, got out of their vehicles, and she started shooting her M203 grenade launcher at the ambush site. Then she and Sergeant 9 assaulted forward, just the two of them. There's about 50 Al-Qaeda guys, 10 MPs, 2 go forward to clear this trench. So as they come up to the trench, she lays down, throws in 2 grenades. They explode. The 2 of them jump in the trench and move out and start clearing. She killed 3 more Al-Qaeda guys with her M4 rifle. They cleared the entire trench, the 2 of them. They secured this area. And I don't mean this to sound too morbid, and it's not about body counts or these kinds of things, but none of these MPs were killed. And in the end, they killed 27 Al-Qaeda troops. They had 6 wounded, and they captured 1 who was not wounded. 2 military police soldiers. And Sergeant Leanne Hester that day was awarded the Silver Star. Not that day, it came a little while later. She was our first woman to receive the Silver Star in combat since World War II. Now, talk about resilience. She went through some tough times. And she, after this deployment, for those of you that don't know, we had some really ugly years in Iraq in 2005, 6, and 7. It was probably the worst of it. But she left the Army, got out of the Army, frankly did not do real well, and so re-enlisted and came back in the Army. She's now a Sergeant First Class, still in the Kentucky Army National Guard, has deployed once to Afghanistan and continues to do well. And eventually, she was able to use this experience as an opportunity for growth. And not only did she serve others by saving lives and those kinds of things that particular day, but more importantly, she used that experience to help her troops years after the fact. Again, that's what, to me, what being a hero is all about. I could tell you another story, and I know many of you know this one, so I'll only hit some of the highlights, but in the early part of this century, we had a young lady who lived in Montgomery, Alabama, and was struggling to work her way through school and was struggling to be able to make a living because of transportation needs. And her name was Rosa Parks. Now, in her case, she was unable to get from point A to point B without riding on the city buses, and it was always a friction point when she got on the buses because of the policy at the time where African Americans were not allowed to ride in the front part of the bus. And actually, there's a gray zone. There was kind of a, okay, this is for white people only in the front of the bus, African Americans, or what they called colored people at the time, in the back of the bus. And then there's this area that was kind of a gray zone, if you will, that was available for anybody. But on the morning in question, of course, what you all have probably heard this story, she sat down in the gray zone. She sat down in an area where she was allowed to sit as an African American, but when a white person got on the bus, she was told to get up and go to the back of the bus. Now, actually, she had been directed to go to the back of the bus on a different occasion, And the driver at that time was a young man named, I think, James Blakely, if I remember correctly. So years later, when this happens, same driver. And she had sworn that at that time she would never do this again. So she refused to give up her seat. And, you know, again, you may not know, but this was really, this Montgomery bus boycott was a huge moment in our civil rights movement. You see, there was a young Baptist preacher in Montgomery at the time, not really well known, but the NAACP was looking for somebody to be able to speak out about this. And Rosa Parks was not the first person who refused to give up her seat, but she was the first one that decided that she wanted to make it a public deal. She was not just going to pay her fine and go away, and so she actually went to jail for it. And the young Baptist preacher was a young man named Martin Luther King Jr. Now again, when you think of their two actions over the years and what an entire difference they made for our country, and I'm not here to say that things are great, because they're not. We've got a lot of work to do. But they made a huge difference. Those are heroes, right? Courageous acts and a noble purpose. Acting with heart and serving other people. And kind of as a postscript, the Supreme Court got involved. They decided that this particular policy from the city of Montgomery was unconstitutional. So Rosa got on the bus and proudly sat in the first seat the first morning that she could. And this was just a little bit more than a year later after she had initiated the boycott with her refusal to give up the seat. The driver of the bus was James Blakely, by the way. Same guy in all three cases. But that's what heroism is about. And today, you're going to hear from a great group of heroes. But there's something that's more important that I'd like to say. If you're looking for your heroes in Sports Illustrated or People magazine, you're going to be led astray. Look instead to your left and right. Because everybody in this room has what it takes to be a Stephen Sanford or a Leanne Hester or a Rosa Parks. Because being a hero is not about being rich or talented or beautiful or famous. Being a hero is about the choices that you make. And every one of you has what it takes to be a hero. You know, being a hero is, look at a kindergarten teacher. I mean, all kinds of people around us can be heroes. And today, we're going to talk about resilience and how to help other people and how to help them build resilience as well as in yourself. And in my mind, acting with heart and serving others is really all about what it takes to be a hero. God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for coming. Do you want me to leave? Okay, I've got a 10-minute warning. Can I answer questions? Am I allowed to, or do you want me not to? I'm in charge. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to, I think about 3 or 4 of us will be on panels throughout the day, but we have a little bit of time, and so I thought I would open it up and see if anybody has any questions for me. First of all, let me ask, media present? Do we have any media present? Okay, nothing, here's what I'll tell you, nothing is off limits. You can ask me about border security and all that stuff. I'll tell you what I know, but I'm a little disconnected from it right now. So, do we have any questions?
Good morning, Sarah Johnson, Scribblehorn, Deputy Base Commander here at Joint Base Andrews. Thanks for being here today. One question I would have is, from the experience you have as a senior leader, what is a personal resilience story that you may be able to share with the team, and maybe if not you, someone close to you, and how you saw them work through that challenge?
Well, I've lost some friends. And one of them I wear here on my wrist, Todd Clark. His wife gave me this. Todd worked for me on 3 different tours in Iraq, and then he was wounded in his first tour in Afghanistan. We got him out and treated him for a couple of months. He went back on a second tour of Afghanistan, and on the 8th of June of 2013, he was killed in an insider attack. And Todd left a great wife, Shelley, behind, 2 young kids who were both now following his footsteps. Both of them are students at Texas A&M. There you go, gig 'em, right? I'm just learning I just moved from Texas, so I'm still learning some of the Texas A&M stuff. But I don't want to talk about Todd, I want to talk a little bit about Shelley. And Shelley did not have an easy time through all of this. And part of the problem, the unit that I had been in, the second time I served with Todd in Iraq, actually we were together a couple of times in a different kind of unit, and then I brought him back into the unit that I was in 10th Mountain Division. And we were in Iraq at the time, so I brought him to Iraq, and then he stayed in 10th Mountain for a couple of more tours. But this particular brigade that he was in, it was a good brigade, but after he had been wounded, he was asked by his brigade commander to go back and serve on a transition team again in Afghanistan, which is unfortunately, no timing is good, but it was a week before he was going to redeploy. He'd been to Afghanistan for a year. He was a week short of redeploying, and I had kind of helped get him the next job, which was his dream job, which was to be the XO of the Army ROTC detachment at Texas A&M. And, I heard about Todd's demise, and, so there's a lesson in here for me. I didn't reach out to Shelley for about 3 weeks. And I didn't, again, I knew Todd very well. I didn't know her very well. But I did reach out to her, and then I found out that the unit that Todd had come from, this brigade, and this brigade commander that had asked him to come back, never talked to her. And so she had some resentment. But we talked over time, and she, I know she misses her husband every day. It's hard for me to believe that's been 6 years. But she is dealing with it in a more positive way now. And, she and I talked at one point in time, and this must have been later in 2013, and she lives in San Antonio now, where I just moved from, so I'd see her occasionally there. But I had talked to her about this, and I think she kind of embraced it. There's an article written by a guy named James Bond Stockdale, Vice Admiral Navy. Most of you have probably never heard of Admiral Stockdale, but he was actually a vice presidential candidate with Ross Perot in the presidential election of 1992. One of the smartest guys on the face of the planet. He wrote this article. It's just about 10 pages long. It's called The World of Epictetus. Epictetus, Greek name. And so I'd never heard of Epictetus. Well, it turns out Epictetus is a father of a Greek philosophy called Stoicism. And Admiral Stockdale had gone to the Naval Academy and, done what most things happen in a Naval Academy, heavy focus on math and sciences and those kinds of things. And he said, but this didn't really prepare him for what he was going to face as more than 8 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. What did prepare him is he went to graduate school at Stanford and just kind of on a whim decided to take a philosophy class. And he said that it was his study of the classics that helped him deal with it. And in this case, he learned all about Epictetus and Stoicism. Now, Stoicism is a school, the big idea, and I'm not a philosopher, so please forgive me, but the big idea is to look at the world with a frame of reference that says, don't get excited about the things you can't control. You need to spend energy on how you respond to everything. So the one thing that each of us controls every day is our attitude. Sometimes you can affect actions around you, sometimes you can't. Shelley could not affect the fact that Todd had been killed by a guy in Afghanistan. But she could control her attitude and her response. And I'm not here to tell you that things are all happy, roses blooming everywhere and all that, because it's not. She still lives, she struggles every day. But she has decided that she's going to set the example for her kids on how to have a positive life. And so for me, that's a key to resilience. Understanding that we're going to face tough times, and how we respond, what our attitude is, will make a heck of a difference. I used to tell this to soldiers. Believe it or not, general officers give Article 15s, right? I mean, I hate to say that when I was a commander of the military district of Washington, I had the Army's only worldwide court-martial convening authority. And so everybody who is thanks ladies, everybody who is deployed around the world and works in embassies in the Army, they all fell under my authority. And they found inventive ways to get in trouble, right? And one of my messages to them, and except for instead of a senior airman, I was given an Article 15 to colonels, or these kinds of things. And one of my examples, or one of my messages to them, look, you can't control what I'm going to do to you. You can't go back and change things. But what you can do is control your attitude about it. How are you going to move out from here on? Because 20 years from now, when you look back on this moment, I know you're going to have regrets. But what I hope for you is that 20 years represents an opportunity for growth. But that growth completely depends on your attitude. You can blame other people, you can blame the system, all kinds of things, or you can just accept it as, man, I screwed up, how do I move forward? And so I guess the big message for me is, if you start with a good attitude, you're well on your way to figuring it out. It doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, because they are. But it's how we respond to them that counts. Okay, I'm going to break contact. I think, Simon, you're up next. Thanks, everybody.